Hi, and welcome to Wednesday Excerpts. I'm author Betsy St, and today I'm going to read to you an excerpt from a scene in my novel, The Key to Love. This is a story about Bree and Gerard. Bree is a romance-obsessed baker who has a small-town bakery in Kansas, and she is trying to just wait and hold out for a love like her parents. Gerard is a love-scorned permanent bachelor type who is a travel writer sent to do a write-up on this bakery. So this scene takes place right after a small-town wedding where Bree had helped the bride and groom get together, and everything is just crashing down on her, and she is kind of having a moment outside, as you'll see. This is where the hero Gerard goes to find her. Here we go. A frantic splashing of water sounded a few yards away, and his eyes finally adjusted to the shadows. Bree was standing knee-deep in the stone fountain, pawing anxiously through the water. Was this what had been bothering her for the last several days? He cleared his throat. Come on, Cupcake, out of the fountain. She ignored him, water splashing up onto the hem of her dress. It has to be here somewhere. Her gaze remained riveted on the small waves she was creating. Unless you're looking for a goldfish, I don't think it is. He took a few steps closer so he didn't have to speak quite as loudly. If the wedding guests saw their beloved pastry chef swimming with her clothes on, well, let's just say Charles would have a media heyday if word got out. Revenge would be easy. Thankfully, he hadn't shown up to see for himself. Bree dove into the water up to her elbows, and the clang of metal hitting rock made him squint to decipher through the shadows. What are those? Keys. Keys. Okay, nope. Repeating it did not bring clarity. To the love locks. She brushed damp hair back from her face, her expression a twisted mask of hurt and panic. I have to find my parents' key. Oh no. His heart stammered a sympathetic beat. There's probably 100 keys in there. She stirred the waters again, more than that by now. Are you familiar with the phrase needle in a haystack? She ignored him, or maybe didn't hear him. I have to get their lock off the fence. Why? She shook her head, refusing to answer as she scooped up another handful of keys. He tried a different route of reason. How are you going to recognize it? I hung it up after they died. It's gold, and it has their initials stamped on one side. She held a key up to the moonlight and then tossed it back into the fountain. Grabbed another handful from the fountain floor. Checked, tossed, tossed. He crossed his arms over his chest. This is going to take you all night, Bree. Then help me. Her voice cracked as she looked up, fully focusing on him for the first time since their dance prior. Wet hair straggled down her shoulders and dark makeup ran under her eyes. From water or tears? Something surged in his chest. Irritation. At her for her foolish mission, and at himself for getting mixed up in it. But mostly at himself for not being able to fix it. But the last-minute wedding prep had taken over, and she'd soldiered through, apparently to her own detriment. There was only one thing to do. He towed off his loafers and cuffed his pants. The water was cold, almost unbearably cold. Chills raced up his bare calves as the water lapped at the bottom of his pants. He set his jaw, reached down, and felt for keys. He came up with 3, all silver. He tossed them back, then realized the better approach was to discard the already examined keys on the side of the fountain so they wouldn't keep picking up the same ones. Well, no, the better approach was to find out exactly what was going through that head of hers so they could get out of the fountain and into dry socks. He waded toward her. What are you doing, Bree? She shuffled through the keys in her palm. You know what? He gently took her wrist. How long has their lock been on the fence? It was the first one up. She rolled in her bottom lip but wouldn't look at him. The moonlight cast a shiny glow on the top of her damp blonde head. Then shouldn't you leave it there? She pulled her hand free. It's a lie. Her voice shook, and she tossed the rejected keys back into the water before grabbing another handful. When she stood, she straightened so aggressively he had to step back to avoid a headbutt. Because you think your mom might have had an affair? You were right all along. Love isn't real. I never said it wasn't real. Look, don't backpedal now because you want to argue, okay? She waved her hand. Your vibe was clear all along, crystal clear, and you were right. His heart clenched. This was not what he wanted to do. Bree was light and goodness and faith. He hadn't meant to let his bitterness snuff out her spark. Those were his issues and his past, not hers. He couldn't stand to watch her knock her mom off the pedestal she'd been on all these years. Not like this. Bree, don't. It's fine. I just want to take their lock off the gate. Her voice was level, controlled, too controlled. A muscle worked in her jaw. I thought they had a solid relationship, but apparently they didn't. I thought they were an example, but they weren't. Her tone wavered slightly. I thought they were an inspiration to aspire to, but... Look, love isn't a sham. He interrupted her before she could finish her depressing monologue. She was running on straight emotion now and would probably feel silly tomorrow, just like he would for standing in this fountain. He tried to catch her eye, but she was too busy examining more keys. Look, just because your parents might or might not have had some issues does not mean their marriage wasn't genuine. You don't understand. No, he didn't. He stabbed his fingers through his hair. Do you even know for sure? I can't... Do you even know for sure? Frustration and confusion warred for first place in his train of thought. But silencing both of those was the acute, almost painfully realization. You don't understand. No, he didn't. Frustration and confusion warred for first place in his train of thought. But silencing both of those was the almost painful realization of how beautiful Bree looked. Smeared makeup, damp dress, ragged hair and all. Her vulnerability from the dance was gone, shut up behind this defensive wall that she'd concocted of assumptions and keys. He wanted to tear it down. He wanted to light her spark again. He wanted to fix it. So he sloshed through the water toward her, grabbed her around the waist and tugged her hard. He sloshed through the water toward her, grabbed her around the waist, and tugged her hard against his body. Her hands gripped his arms with surprising strength. Keys splashed into the water at their feet. He wasn't sure whose lips found whose first, but suddenly they were kissing, lips melding into one. She tasted like Pettifor frosting and fruity chapstick. And hope. His grip tightened around her as her fingers dug into his biceps. Heat surged through his chest. He'd gone for a spark, but he created an inferno. Shouts suddenly rang from the reception. He instinctively jerked backward, or had Bree pulled away first. They looked at the tent and then at each other as they stepped away. Reality began a slow descent, and the water he'd almost grown numb to crept up his legs with an aching chill. Laughter sounded from the party. The bride and groom were getting ready to go. The moment was over and there was way too much to say. He swallowed hard, wishing he was better at verbal words than written ones. Bree pulled her skirt from the water and bunched it in one hand. I guess I should probably go. He laughed, but it sounded forced. Right, duty calls. He grasped her arm and helped her out of the fountain, then climbed out beside her, suddenly unsure of everything. Unsure what she was thinking, unsure how he was supposed to dry off his feet with nothing but leaves for a towel. Unsure if that kiss had been a mistake, or if the real mistake was in letting Bree walk back to the reception with so much left unsaid. Thanks to Tony for having me on her show. If you'd like to keep up with my books, you can find me at www.BetsySaintamant.com. You can subscribe to my newsletter there on my website. And also, you can look for my new release coming this October with Ravel called Tacos for Two. Thanks.